Call this meeting to order. Welcome to meeting number 138 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Government Operations and Estimates, also known, of course, as the Mighty Ogo, the only committee that matters. Before we start, as always, a nagging reminder to keep your headphones away from your microphones at all times so we can protect the hearing of our very valued interpreters. And we are back with Mr. Anderson. Welcome back to Ogo, Mr. Anderson. We'll start you off with a 5-minute opening, and hopefully we'll get to you for the whole hour today. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for inviting me to appear here. Good morning, everybody. My name is John Anderson. I'm a trade union researcher with PIPS, which is one of the major federal unions. But I'm here on my own behalf. I'm not here on behalf of PIPS at all. I'm a former Policy and Government Affairs Director.
Valeureux témoin commence l'interprétation.
Mr. Chair, the interpretation in French doesn't seem to be coming through.
Just bear with us one moment, Mr. Anderson.
Le micro est bien allumé pour ce qui est de l'interprète, mais
The microphone is on, but perhaps there's a system issue.
Do you mind testing it, interpreters? It's working for me.
C'est comme si le système était pas, il n'y a pas de bruit de fond, il n'y a pas rien. Fait que...
There's no background sound or anything, so it's as if the system wasn't activated, actually.
Mr. Lemur, we're just going to try again. Can you let us know if it is working?
Oui, mais je peux
Okay.
vous dire, mais c'est pas encore le cas.
It's working.
Okay.
Maybe
No.
it's with his device, so...
I'm just going to suspend for a moment here. Are back. Mr. Anderson, go ahead, please.
Thank you. I am a former Policy and Government Affairs Director for the Canadian Cooperative Association, now called CMC. I was a Vice President of Research for the Canadian Council on Social Development, and also the former Policy Director for the federal NDP. I've written extensively on the Post Office. In a study I did some 10 years ago for the Canadian Postmasters and Assistants Association, I found Canada Post had shut down over 1,700 rural post offices since the 1980s. In spite of a 1994 moratorium on rural closures, the shutdowns continued. In a survey I did of 1,635 mayors, reeves, and band chiefs where a post office has been closed, documents that affect the communities, some communities saw their federally run post offices replaced with a franchise outlet. 53% of communities had no postal outlet of any kind. The closure of post offices were signaled out by many respondents as another nail in the coffin of rural Canada. At the time, some 24% of communities expressed very high levels of dissatisfaction with the present postal service. This survey, along with more than 10 years of work on postal issues, are contained in my recent December 2023 book, Why Canada Needs Postal Banking. This is the book here, which is published by Friesen Press. One of the major studies that I did, which was included in this book, was for the Canadian Centre for Policy Alternatives in 2013 and was funded by the Canadian Union of Postal Workers, Why Canada Needs Postal Banking. The most recent annual report of Canada Post demonstrated that Canada Post has been losing money in recent years. Any quick fixes which involve cutting services will particularly affect rural Canada. Ian Lee, a Carleton professor, recently had his proposal to fix the financial difficulties of Canada Post published in the Globe and Mail of May 28, 2024. His proposal contains a series of ideas linked to cutting delivery days, creating more community mailboxes, and privatizing and selling off government-owned post office outlets. What's wrong with this proposal? First, there are no parts of the proposal here to increase revenue of existing services except by privatization and selling off the facilities, or by worsening the delivery situation for millions of citizens and reducing the number of good quality unionized postal jobs. Instead of these measures, we should start by assuring that more of parcel delivery is handled by Canada Post, which has the only Canada-wide delivery system, and less by big foreign-owned private carriers. This would require agreements with major parcel producers and perhaps legislation including extending delivery days and times. Second, there are no proposals here to assure Canada Post has more revenue through new services. The Canadian Union of Postal Workers has proposed a whole series of measures from postal outlets and offices such as elder check-ins, community internet services, food delivery, electric vehicle charging stations, and other community services, such as government license, passports, and postal banking. I wanted to expand on this last proposal, postal banking, because of its importance to rural and remote post office. Worldwide, over 84% of postal services already offer financial services, as a 2023 Universal Postal Union study indicates. There are 2.38 billion postal banking accounts worldwide in 2023, up from 1.96 billion in 2016. To start with, postal banking existed before in Canada for 100 years after Confederation. That was actually started by a Conservative government, the government of John A. Macdonald, in 1868. When Canada and the U.S., and it existed until 1968, when Canada and the U.S., which also had postal banking, both terminated postal banking services in that year. Today, we're in a time where more and more local banking and credit union branches are being closed. Many in rural and small-town Canada. We have gone from 7,964, almost 8,000 branches, bank branches in 1990, to 6,300 in 2014, to only 5,600 in 2022. And that's the last figures which are available from the Canadian Bankers Association. It's probably gone down since then. We don't know because they haven't published for the 2023 figures yet. Credit unions, except for Desjardins, also saw locations decline from 1890 in 2015 to 1643 in 2023. Desjardins went from 1,122 in 2015 to only 661 today. So there's been a major decline. Many can do banking on the internet, but it's hard to develop a relationship with banking employees to negotiate a mortgage or business loan over the internet or deposit your daily business earnings if the branch is many kilometers away. In another report that I did, why post offices...
Sorry, Mr. Anderson, I have to get you to wrap up.
Okay. I found that, I'll just terminate here on this thing, is that I found that in 2,620 small towns and rural communities with post offices, 45% did not have a bank branch. I will stop here, and the rest is contained in the notes which I sent out, and I'd be very happy to answer any questions on this issue. I think it's something which we should be doing in Canada. We should be getting back to, and I think it's good all round. I don't think it's a partisan issue. I think it's something which is outside of partisan politics.
Thanks, Mr. Anderson. We'll start with Mrs. Block for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and I welcome you, Mr. Anderson, to our meeting. I want to apologize for my voice. I woke up this morning and this is as good as it gets, so I will try and get through my questions. Move away, exactly. We too have noted the continuous closure of rural post offices, despite the moratorium that you referenced in your opening remarks, which I think underpins, in my view, one of the compelling reasons for undertaking this study. I represent a very large rural riding in Saskatchewan, and this is an issue that I'm well aware of and have had many constituents raise concerns, as well as many community leaders who are deeply concerned about the loss of their post office. So I am intrigued, not that I haven't heard about postal banking and the potential of it before, but I am intrigued by your presentation. If Canada Post were to take on the responsibility of postal banking, would every post office that exists in rural Canada and maybe even in urban Canada, would every post office need the facilities to operate a bank? And to operate as a bank. Is that one of your suggestions? And I guess knowing the infrastructure deficit we have in rural Canada when it comes to post offices and now even retail outlets, it would seem that for many communities, to construct the infrastructure needed to operate as a bank, such as vaults or teller desks, this might be untenable for them. Could you address that issue as well?
Well, I mean, I think that it's important to note that if you're going to offer postal banking services, it could be introduced, region by region, or it could be introduced all at once. Certainly, the idea of postal banking as it exists in, say, the United Kingdom or in France, which are two of the big examples, both of which are profitable for the postal services, offering these financial services. The French postal bank, the Banque Postale, is one of the top 50 largest banks in the world. And certainly, post offices right now already have computer hookup. Just about very few. There may be one or two which don't, but the vast majority of them have access to internet access, etc. And this is really what is needed to offer banking services. That's the prime attribute, which obviously in the past, before that existed, it might have been more difficult. But now with that, it is not difficult. And they already in the past offered various services. I mean, you could buy financial services. You can still at a post office buy a postal money order, for example. And so they already have mechanisms to deal with money, with funds, et cetera, and of course they would have to be enhanced, those mechanisms. I don't think that is a particularly difficult thing to do. Plus, it's important to note that banking is a very prosperous industry. The big six banks in Canada last year made $60 billion in profit. So there's money in banking. There's money in offering services in banking, and that I think that postal banking would be able to offer services at reasonable rates. And it would be able to do this. So I think that this is something which can be delivered. Of course, there would have to be upgrading and training, but it's also possible nowadays to have online specialists to answer questions, etc.
Thank you very much. I do want, you didn't get to the end of your opening remarks. I did read them, and so I'm interested in hearing your opinion on the cancellation of the My Money Loan program that Canada Post had undertaken, and I just want to give you an opportunity to speak to that.
Well, I mean, I was very disappointed by the rapid cancellation of that program, which was only existed for a couple of months, really fully operational. Then it was canceled, and there was never a full explanation of why that was canceled. I don't know if you've had one here, but certainly that is something which was a step forward. And like I would welcome any steps forward for Canada Post to move in the direction of financial services. I think they're all very important ones, and they're all ones which are going to help rural post offices particularly. And I think it's really important to note that there's so many communities now which do not have a bank branch of any kind anymore. And I've interviewed mayors of communities who said, "Oh, we thought a plan to set ourselves up as a retirement community, and now that's in danger because we don't have any bank branches anymore." And many of the senior citizens, customers, which we want. Residents, which we wanted to attract, don't want to come here because it still says it's going to offer more financial services. That's still their plan. We haven't seen those financial services yet, but I hope that it moves forward in that direction. Of course, I think the main thing to do would be to offer postal banking services, and they'd be offered in a number of different ways. In the UK, postal banking services were introduced in a different way.
I'm sorry, we're past our time, but I'm sure in another round we can continue. Mr. Kuzmirchuk, please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Anderson, for being with us here today, and thank you so much for your testimony on postal banking and rural postal service, which is so incredibly vital and important to communities across Canada. I had a chance to walk in the Labor Day parade and this summer, and had a chance to walk with postal workers, and I just wanted to reiterate how incredibly hardworking and dedicated and committed and compassionate our postal workers are. The work that they do is absolutely outstanding. And I wanted to begin by just sharing a deal of gratitude for their hard work and their commitment to delivering the mail and looking after our communities and our neighbors. I also wanted to add a little bit of a high note today. The Bank of Canada and Stats Canada today indicated that the inflation rate has dropped down to 2%. That's 8 consecutive months of inflation, low inflation within the Bank of Canada's target rate. And that is good news for working families and residents across Canada. Mr. Anderson, I wanted to ask you, in the definition of rural in the 1994 moratorium, we actually don't have a definition of rural in that moratorium. And I wanted to ask you, to begin by asking you, in your opinion, how do we define rural when it comes to rural postal service? Let's start off with some basics.
Well, I don't have a clear example of that, but I think what is important in Canada is that it's important to always remember that Canada, along with Australia, I think are the two countries which have the highest percentage of their citizens living in major urban areas and not in small towns and not in rural communities. And so that we have a big tendency in Canada, because of that, to forget about what the needs of rural citizens are. Small town Canada, farm Canada, all of those things, all of those areas are often forgotten. And I think that's why, postal banking, to me, is a crucial element, particularly in a time when the major banks and credit unions, and I worked for the Canadian Cooperative Association in the past, so I was close to credit unions, they have both shut down many branches, and this is not helpful. Those branches are shut down primarily, and the effect of shutting them down is primarily in small towns and affect rural communities. That's where the effect of that is the most severe. And so therefore I think we've got to really reverse that. And the post office, because we have the locations, we have the staff, we have an opportunity to develop postal banking without the kind of massive investment. We have to find a bunch of locations. We've got locations. We've got staff. and we can move forward in that degree much faster than in a lot of other new government policies.
The reason I ask is we've heard at committee that previous jurisdictions, previous areas like Milton, for example, were described or defined as rural. I think it'd be hard-pressed to find someone to define Milton as a rural community these days with its growing population. Is it important, in your opinion, for us to be able to maximize resource allocation to rural communities, that we first begin with a proper definition of what a rural community is so that we can differentiate communities like Milton that were once rural but I would argue are now urban and suburban versus communities, let's say, in other parts of the country that are truly rural? Is it important to have that definition? And can you help us maybe?
I think it's important, but I mean, in Canada, as I mentioned before, we've got to start with looking at the area of Canada outside of the major CMAs, the major census metropolitan areas as defined by Stats Canada. Those are not rural, and they take into, as your example of Milton or what that kind of community. But outside of that, there's a whole area of Canada which is basically small town and rural Canada. And I think rural, of course, has to be defined. We're not talking about purely, non town areas. We're talking about small town Canada. We're talking about Canada outside and away from these census metropolitan areas.
Gotcha. I did want to turn my attention to postal banking. I find the concept interesting, but I want to understand it a little bit better. Can you help me understand what is postal banking? Are we talking about a full shop, full stop bank like an RBC or Scotiabank that you see sort of around cities? Or can you tell us what is postal banking and what types of services could be offered there?
Well, in the final analysis, when it's been operating for a while, postal banking would offer all the major services that the traditional banks or credit unions offer. That doesn't mean that from day one, they have to offer all of those services. Those services can be built up over time to offer those products. And also, given the fact that we have the possibility of using the Internet, we can offer some services in a postal bank location via the Internet for those who can get onto the Internet, but also for those who can go to a post office. So I think that's something which obviously we've seen that in countries all over the world, postal banking has been a large success, and it's offered in slightly different mechanisms, and certainly say
Mr.
you
Anderson,
can.
I have to cut you off again because we're past our time. We only have a certain amount of time, but we're going to go over to Mr. Lemire. Welcome to Ogo, sir. And colleagues, we'll just ask everyone to leave a bit of extra time for Mr. Anderson to answer. Go ahead, Mr. Lemire.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. First of all, thank you, Mr. Anderson, for your actions taken for the postal services. I think that's a subject that we really should be talking about this committee, and we should be talking about it more with the government. I found the previous questions and the previous discussion very important. That is defining what rural means here. I'm the member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue, which is called a northern rural region in Quebec, which is 6 hours away from here. And one of the issues we have is, for example, in Rouyn-Noranda, or same thing in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, the problem with building pools, for example. So it's the same thing with other things. For example, there's an area with 1.6 million people, and that I'd see this building was built in 2010 thanks to the Rural Municipal Fund. That's a new building that went up in that kind of building. So, for example, there was a pool. The community pool was closed in Rouyn-Noranda because there was not enough money for that rural area. So Gatineau, which is considered a dormitory for one of the huge metropolitan areas in Canada, is considered a rural area. I mean, how can we highlight today the importance of use of land so that the government understands how can, as the government, we put in place this as a priority, make people understand that this is very important. It's important for all the people who live on a certain piece of land or in a certain territory or area to get access to basic services.
Thank you very much for the question. I think that it's really important for us to deliver equal services across the country to both our big developed urban areas and rural or small town Canada areas. I think that's extremely important. We have to really make sure that everybody's getting equal treatment. And the example you gave obviously seems that there's some confusion there in terms of how funds are delivered. If Gatineau gets money out of some rural fund, that doesn't seem to me to be the proper way of using that money. So I think we have to do that, and it's that's why I come back to postal banking and why I'm interested in that topic, because I think that as I've mentioned, Canada is becoming a country where we've got huge numbers of people living in these major cities and not enough people living in small town Canada, and I think this is something which other European countries don't have this issue. But we have this issue in Canada. Australia has it even worse, apparently, than us. So that's something which we want to correct. And if we want to correct it, postal banking is important because we already have those institutions in every town. We already have, 5,800, I think by the last report, around 5,800 postal outlets across Canada. So we've got an infrastructure which is already there, and we can begin to add financial services, the delivery of financial services, and allow people to get those kind of issues. I wanted to just, say small town Canada, and I would single in small town Canada. I would also add to that Indigenous Canada. Indigenous Canada, there are many post offices. There are few. There are few in the over 600 communities. There's hardly any bank branches, so that they have post offices. So there again, I think this is something which could help Indigenous communities also. And I think it's certainly people need to have a bank branch. It's all very well to say you can do everything on the internet, but if you want to get a mortgage, if you want to get a loan for your business, if you want to put cash which you've got through some business that you're operating into your account, if you don't have one in your community, that is a big difficulty. So I think that this is something which we should be doing, we can do, and we can encourage Canada Post to do much more than it is doing now as far as financial services are concerned.
Je vous ai laissé aller parce
I let you speak because I thought it was very interesting, but there's a few things that I want to go back to in what you said, so I'll just ask you a few questions in a row. So I met with some people from Canada Post because we were looking at something else that could improve things and especially increase revenue in rural Canada. For example, the fleet of vehicles is one of the biggest ones in Canada. So if we're looking at the electrification of this, that would have a positive impact on the environment, and that would mean building charging stations across the country, both rural and elsewhere. So that would be a great advantage to other electric vehicle users, for example, in my region. Now, you know also how committees work. Do you have any recommendations for redefining what rural means in Canada so we can ask the government to look at a new definition for that to ensure better services?
Thank you for that question. I'm sure you have a recommendation around those issues, but certainly we have to have clear definitions of what is rural and what is urban. But as I said, in Canada, it's not that difficult because we have these large CMAs, which you can name on the fingers of your hands, where most people, the vast majority of people, are living in those, and they're not living in the small towns. And yet we're not growing small town Canada, and we're not providing it with the services that it needs. And one of those services is postal banking. But that's also the case in some of the big urban areas, because in some of the big urban areas, we have closed down the bank branches too.
Thanks very much. Mr. Bachrach, over to you for 6 minutes, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Anderson, for being with us for this study and bringing your experience. I wanted to set aside the concept of postal banking for a second. It's a fascinating one, and I agree with your suggestion that it would be a great benefit to small communities, including Indigenous communities across the country. But I'm just interested in the trend when it comes to the closure of rural and remote post offices. And what I've seen over the past couple of years in Northwest BC is this trend from full-service post offices with Canada Post staff to franchises to community mailboxes. And that is the way that Canada Post has essentially managed its budget or cut its budget on the backs of rural communities. Is that a fair assessment of sort of the trend that we're seeing? Because, you know, Canada Post claims to be respecting this moratorium, and yet we see hundreds of rural post offices closing. How is that possible?
Well, I think you're bringing up an excellent point of the direction that Canada Post has been going in, and it has not been reinforcing its Canada Post-owned post offices. It has been. I mean, one of the greatest examples is right here in Ottawa, in the Glebe neighborhood, where you have a major post office, and then right across the street. Literally across the street, you have a post office in a pharmacy, and yet the pharmacy hours for the post office are very substantial. The post office hours for the Canada Post-owned post office are very small. The hours they're not extensive. You can't get service in the evenings, this kind of thing. So we have to, I think, go back on those issues, and we have to look at those issues of providing more and better services and assuring that we don't close down post offices and we don't reduce the services that they're offering. And what I'm proposing is that we offer more services in the post office in all kinds of outlets, whether they're owned by Canada Post or directly or not. But obviously, the Canada Post-owned directly ones are important because usually they're substantial buildings, standalone buildings can easily have the place to increase the infrastructure and to offer banking services.
Canada Post has a revenue-neutral mandate, so they essentially are given the mandate by the government to cover their costs through their operations. And I think it's fair to say that in remote communities and very small rural communities, it's very difficult to imagine how the service could possibly pay for itself just on the basis of population and the volume of parcels. It's there are some fixed costs in operating a post office that probably can't be justified based on the volume. Is one of the solutions to think about rural and remote communities differently from the rest of Canada Post service and have a different mandate for rural delivery in Canada, where we think about it more as an essential service and less as something that has to recover 100% of its costs?
Well, I think that Canada Post has to look at itself as one entity, and it has to pay particular attention to rural and remote post office locations. Certainly, that's why I think why I'm proposing postal banking, because postal banking is a very profitable business. And for example, in 2023, the Banque Postale in France made $1.4 billion in profit in Canadian dollars. So I think that this would help. Offering postal bank service would help to have the money to fund services right across the board in communities where just delivering the services might not pay for all the operations. So we have to look at the whole structure and see how we can look at new revenue earning systems and functions which can help us deliver good quality postal services both in large cities and in small towns and rural areas.
Is that the only hope for a rural postal service? That Canada Post has to find ways to generate more revenue? Like, you know, I'm thinking about rural transportation is the other analogous service where, you know, the government keeps trying to find the private sector partners that are somehow going to deliver money-losing services to sparsely populated regions instead of thinking about rural transportation as an essential service that's required in order for rural Canada to be part of the fabric of our country. Is something like postal banking the only hope for rural postal service?
In 30 seconds, Mr. Anderson.
It's not the only hope. It's an important hope. Certainly, the government has to guarantee postal services to everybody. That has to be a guarantee, whether Canada Post makes a profit or not.
Thanks, Mr. Bachrach. Thank you, Mr. Anderson. We're now going to our 5-minute rounds. Mrs. Cusi, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, and thank you very much, Mr. Anderson, for being here with us today. My questions today will be around the security of postal banking. Canada has some of the strongest regulations when it comes to ensuring its banking system remains secure. In your opinion, how could Canada's post offices be able to meet those regulations and ensure the continued safety of Canada's financial institutions, please?
Well, I would give you the example of the United Kingdom, where it's only been a very short time, less than a couple of decades before, where postal banking services have been introduced in the United Kingdom and through all their post offices. And so I think they've managed to do that. And as I said, as I said in the brief, when I was talking to the head of one of the heads of the money services for the post office, he said, I'd be very happy to come over here and show you how to do it. That's what he told me in an interview I did with him. Now, I don't think we need to ask somebody from the United Kingdom to come over and show us how to do that in the post office. But we can look at how they've done it. And certainly what is also important to note is that the federal government has a number of banking services. The federal government has many banking institutions already, has the BDC, the EDC, Farm Credit Canada, etc. It has many banking services and many highly trained and specialized people in banking services, in security services, etc., etc. So it's not that we can't find them. They're employed by the federal government through these institutions, and certainly we can, in setting up those services, the postal bank could use some of that expertise to assure that we have a secure banking system.
So, in your opinion, currently do post offices have the supplies, expertise, and security to properly complete transactions and secure the money of Canadians?
I think that they are already doing that. As far as I said, it depends on obviously the postal office location, but they do postal money orders and secure cash and in that situation already they're doing that. And so for us to move to a more advanced system around offering more services, I think is possible. I mean, we were going to do that with the loans-based program, which was canceled. So obviously, they had thought about how they were going to deliver that, and they've still not explained why that program was canceled. But I think it's possible to introduce those programs in a secure fashion. I believe we have the expertise, and we're going to have to train people and upgrade people's training, but we already have employees who we can do that with and introduce these services gradually so that we are able to handle those services. As I said, it's been done in other countries. It isn't, the only places. New Zealand is another country where they recently introduced a postal banking system. In many countries, they've had them for a longer period of time. But I believe we can do that. it's not something different. As I said, the federal government has huge financial services and has expertise in financial services, and certainly those services can be used to help structure postal banking services as well.
Yeah, thank you for that. Well, you mentioned these services. So, for example, Canada Post is currently partnered with TD Bank, but going back to the security aspect, TD Bank in the United States obtained a $9 million fine for fraudulent transactions with the potential of $4 billion being involved in these fraudulent transactions. And you point to bringing in the United Kingdom, but as I understand it, the United Kingdom is currently 90% privatized. And if we look at France, both Royal Mail and La Poste are privatized. So in building on this idea, incorporating other countries where the banking is largely privatized, and considering the current security threats that exist, as indicated in the TD example that I gave, would you expect Canada Post to create more partnerships with Canada's banks or work independently?
Well, my personal...
Mr. Anderson, I apologize, but there was not enough time left for a response, so perhaps you can get to it. And Ms. Atwin, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and please feel free to answer Ms. Kuzi's question if you can.
Well, I mean, I think that personally, I think that the French postal banking system is the model I would prefer. However, I think that a lot of the measures which they undertook in the United Kingdom and in other places is also they've done partnerships with private banks, et cetera, to deliver this certain services. I think that moving in the direction of postal banking services is what is key. And I think that there are different ways of doing it, but I think we can move in those directions. And certainly the partnership with TD could have been an interesting one. However, it was canceled. I think that any moves towards more financial services being delivered to the post through the post office, with the post office controlling how they're delivered, but how those partnerships exist, of course, are that's up to the decisions at a particular time of what can be done.
Sure. And so, I mean, you mentioned moving towards this, but you did also mention that up until 1968, that Canada and U.S. had postal banking services. Can you speak a bit about what that looked like in operation, and perhaps your opinion on why we moved away from it in 1968?
Well, I mean, I think that's a PhD thesis there, a doctoral thesis for somebody, as to why Canada and the U.S. Dissolved their postal banking services in the same year. Obviously, there were a lot of institutions which, private sector financial institutions, which were not happy with that with the postal banking being delivered at all, and so that it was ended fairly abruptly, and I don't think that was a good. Was a good measure, but it was done at that time. It's interesting to know that in the United States as well, it's not just in Canada where there's been a revival of postal banking issues, and that I in fact went to the United States and heard Senator Elizabeth Warren. I know Senator Bernie Sanders are both two advocates, as many others, around postal banking issues in the United States. So there's a move to reconstitute that for the exact same reasons in terms that we're talking about here: closure of rural and banking branches, the fact that you can't get banking services in large parts of the United States in the same way as you used to.
Thank you. And you mentioned, your preference for the Banque Postale model versus the UK post office. There's also other examples. There's Japan, Bulgaria, Netherlands, Brazil. Many have been privatized or shut down. Can you explain the mixed success of postal banking internationally and why the introduction of postal banking has often led to privatization?
Well, I think that postal banking is still extremely growing phenomenon worldwide. The latest report shows that. So it's not something which is shrinking; it's growing worldwide in terms of number of banking accounts, etc. How a postal bank is managed and whether it is managed in terms of a partnership with the private sector or it is a state-owned institution depends a lot on the politics of the day in that particular country and how that people see those developments. But as I said, I mean, we've seen very successful postal banking, and I point to the French model simply because obviously Canada has a particular affinity with France and looking at what's happening in France for good reasons, and that is one where it's been very successful. But even in the UK, where it's not as extensive a model, and it's done in where they've had private sector banks run the services for the post office. It's still a situation where you can go into any post office in the UK and deposit money, withdraw money, open savings accounts, all kinds of things like that, which is extremely important, which you cannot do in Canada. And so I think we can do it in a number of different ways. Which is the best way to do it? As I said, I have my preference, but I think that any step forward in terms of postal banking is important. And I think it's important mainly for small town and rural Canada, but also even in big cities where we've got banking deserts. You've got to go to the downtown of any or the central area of many Canadian cities, and you will find very few banking branches anymore.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Lemaire, go ahead, please.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to keep talking about the rural factor here with you and the impact it has on services to Canadians and Service Canada. One of the way to operate, and here we see the link that's clear to me, that's decentralization to trust people in rural areas or in other regions so that people can trust that they can build this up, for example, these postal banking services. It's the same in other sectors. One of the things we've seen in our region is that, for example, we'll see SNC-Lavalin or other business, for example, get contracts for clearing snow throughout the province. But then we see that there are post boxes that are not being cleared of snow because the entrepreneur or the business has decided not to do that. So when people have to go get their mail, or when even the mail gets delivered, it makes things more difficult. That's the kind of reality we're seeing, situation we're really seeing on the ground because we don't have these offices, these post offices necessarily in each area. So how can we make sure we have better services available to these people? For example, it's the same thing for Indigenous communities because they don't have access to everything online because deliveries just don't get there. There aren't enough post boxes because they're not being added to these areas. How can we make sure that people on the ground have more power also to be able to provide and accept these services to everybody who lives there?
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you very much for this question.
I think that we have to assure that we offer equal services to citizens in small town and rural Canada. And why I'm interested in talking about, particularly about postal banking and other services the post office could offer, is because we already have that infrastructure. We don't have to create the infrastructure of the post office. It's already there. We've got 5,800 postal outlets across Canada. I think they say it's dropped below 5,800, almost 5,800. Yeah, but that's a lot of. I think McDonald's has 1,600 burger shops in Canada. So this is Canada Post probably has the largest retail outlets of anything in Canada or in Quebec, and it doesn't matter where in Canada, and so we can use that to offer these other services. We don't have to say, how are we going to do that? Where are we going to put this service? How are we going to? No, we can build up those services and offer them through the post office, which already exists. And so therefore, that's why I think it's it's like something which we should go ahead with because we can offer the services. We can see which ones are going to work, which ones are not going to work. We can test them out in different
Thanks,
regions
Mr. Anderson.
and then move on that basis.
Thank you. Mr. Bachrach,
Merci
please.
beaucoup.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A lot of the post offices in Canada are operated under Canada Post's postmaster provided facility model, whereby the postmaster that Canada Post hires has to secure a facility themselves and provide it for Canada Post's use. And Canada Post pays a small stipend in lieu of rent, usually less than $500 per month. And the postmaster is required to insure the space, shovel the snow, and deliver postal services. I'm wondering about the compatibility of that model with postal banking, because right now what we're seeing is that the postmasters in these circumstances are very poorly compensated. When one of them passes away or for some reason leaves the position, Canada Post has a very difficult time recruiting new rural postmasters to fill those spots. Thinking about postal banking, is that also not a rationale to return to the retail outlet model whereby Canada Post operates a post office that's owned by Canada Post with Canada Post unionized staff that provide services other than postal services, including postal banking and electric vehicle charging, that kind of thing? Do we need to look more at that model for small communities?
Well, definitely, I think we have to look at delivering equal services. And if the model which we have in terms of how the postal outlets are run is it putting in danger those services, we have to move to try to correct that. I think that's obviously the case. People have to be able to get the same kinds of equal services, and we have to make sure that postmasters who are running these services are treated equally. We've already seen the terrible crisis that occurred in the UK around this in terms of how some people were treated around the crisis which they had there around that issue. But I think that we can do this and make sure that we are funding adequately the delivery of rural services. And as I said, postal banking can help that because it can bring in additional revenue, which will allow the post office to have the ability to make sure that rural services are delivered in an equal fashion.
Thank you, Mr. Bachrach. Mr. Brock, and then we'll finish with Mr. Baines.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Mr. Anderson, for your attendance and your contribution to this study. I've got essentially a couple of questions. I may not use all my 5 minutes, but I'm going to read all the questions out to you and give you as much time for your response. So I'm curious as to how the post office itself would compete with large Canadian banks across the country that already have the infrastructure, they already have the name recognition, and are well established. That's one question. Would the new postal banking service rely on public funding? If the post office were offering loans while it is losing $750 million a year, what funds would they be relying on to fund those loans? And lastly, how much would it cost to set up the infrastructure required for postal banking?
Well, thank you very much. Excellent questions. Certainly, postal banking around the world has been a situation where the postal banks have competed with traditional private sector banks. And in the case of Canada, it's not just the private sector, it's credit unions, which are, if you take Quebec, I think it's 70% or more of citizens in Quebec use credit unions as their primary banking source. So there would be competition with existing models. But however, I think that competition is justified because banks and credit unions, but particularly banks, have reneged on what the services that they're providing, particularly to rural Canada. They've pulled out. You can just Google any of the big banks and bank branch closures, and you'll see what towns are hit by the closure of banks, banking branches in small town Canada. A huge number on a regular basis, and so I think that. There's first of all, we need to challenge, excuse me, we need to challenge that. And I think postal banking is one of the ways of offering those kind of services. In the UK, of course, what the system has there is that you can use your banking card with another with another bank to take out money at the post office. So there's ways of accommodating if you're a member of another bank. But I think that it does offer a service which is, extremely important, and I think we could deliver things. The cost of that, I think, temporarily, in order to get the system running, we would have to borrow a small amount of money, but not huge amounts, because we already have an infrastructure. We don't have to buy buildings. We don't have to hire staff. We've got to train staff and introduce programs slowly in terms of services, to make sure the services are accurate and are working well for Canadians who would use them. But I think that is something which is going to be repaid. We've seen in general, in terms of postal banking around the world, that it has been a profitable service. As I said, because many people don't have any other access to banking services, so they would use those postal banking services because they don't have the access to them. And as I said, I mean, right now we've seen another the form that the Canada Post was going to start off was a partnership with TD. They were going to work with TD to deliver some of the financial services through the post office. So there are different ways of doing it, and I think that we can build that situation up where we are able to offer postal banking services in a profitable manner, and I think it's something which does not demand vast amounts of government money in terms of investment to do those things. And we're in a new age, of course, in terms of the internet age, where a lot of these services can be delivered by trained personnel over the internet, and so it's not something where we have to. Well, how are we going to deliver that services? No, we can teach somebody how to deliver a banking service over the internet, and they can have contact with somebody in a central office, etc. And we should be using at the federal level our trained banking experts who are in EDC, the BDC, the Farm Credit Canada, etc. Where we have this whole banking infrastructure in Canada, which is very large, at the federal level, owned by the federal government. So it's not that we don't have anybody who knows what they're doing around banking services. We do.
Thank you. Mr. Baines, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you to our witness for joining us today. And of course, I'd like to recognize our hardworking.
Sorry, Mr. Baines, let me interrupt you for a moment. We're just going to turn up the sound a bit on you. We'll restart your time. Start again, Mr. Baines, if you don't mind.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Is this good?
No, it's not. Let me move the mic a bit closer.
How about now?
That's a bit better. Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Okay, thank you again, and I'll start again. Thank you, Mr. Anderson, for joining us today, and of course recognizing the efforts and dedication of our hardworking Canada Postal workers. I'd like to just touch upon, I think, some parts of you may have touched on before, but I'd like to ask a little bit about the required hardware, software, security, and cybersecurity infrastructure capabilities that you believe that you would be able to meet with respect to having a banking institution set up through Canada Post. If you look at some of the security risks that are associated with the increasing challenges with technology, artificial intelligence, all of these things, we see the protection of people's information that has been compromised in certain corporate companies where people's whether it's like a company like London Drugs here in British Columbia that was compromised. So there's been some recent concerns around that. What are your capabilities that you think that you'll be able to make sure that those risks are mitigated?
Well, first of all, I would say that already Canada Post offices do handle money, handle cash, give out postal money orders, etc., on a regular basis, and some of them do a lot of work in terms of that part of the business. They were moving towards offering loans through the post office, and they had developed certain mechanisms there. I think we can easily rely on our federal banking infrastructure. As I said, the BDC, EDC, Farm Credit Canada, which have expertise in this kind of software that is needed to develop loan programs and the equivalent of mortgage programs, etc. So I think that we have that expertise, and we can employ the latest kinds of technologies that are needed around those issues. That is not something which we have no experience in at the federal level.
So you feel that you're confident with tapping into the existing safety measures, whether it's cybersecurity, to the federal, whatever federal programs or technology is available to easily transition into this with this sector, with what your services would be? Well,
we'd have to go after the particular measures which are needed in terms of financial transactions. So that is a particular area of cybersecurity. And as I said, we have expertise in that level at the federal government level. But as I said, this is something which is, postal banking is done in many countries around the world. So they have succeeded in doing this, and they have not had major issues around. There's not been any particular issues in terms of postal banking that hasn't been found anywhere else. And we've seen every so often there's some issue in terms of private sector banks, but in general, private sector banks are capable of doing this, and so should so should the post office be able to do that.
Can you maybe shed light on some of the research you've done and explain like the mixed success of postal banking internationally? What models have been very successful, and where have they maybe been introduced and then led to privatization?
Well, as I said, most European countries have, if you want to start there, have successful postal banking institutions. Some fairly recently, others for a longer time. Some do not, but the majority do. And of course, we've got major countries such as Japan, China as well, which have big postal banking institutions. And Japan is one of the largest banks, is Postal Bank. Certainly, those companies have been developed using postal staff, retraining them, adding new people where necessary. And I think that it is something which the track record in general is very good. As I mentioned, if some of the banks, the Japan Postal Bank, the French Postal Bank and the Chinese one are amongst the largest banks in the world.
Can I get you to just wrap up? We're past our time.
Okay. So I think that's something which we do have the capacities to do that, and we can find the people who and the programs which will make that secure around those issues.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Baines. Mr. Anderson, thank you for taking the time coming back for a second appearance at OGO. We appreciate everything. We'll update the Canada Post report. I'm thinking maybe a week this Friday. We should probably have it updated by about a week from now but about a week after it is ready, we'll ask for recommendations, and then we'll find a time to actually do the report itself. Mr. Lemire?
Si vous permettez, Monsieur le Président, à la lumière aussi de...
Mr. Chair, based on what we heard also, I think one of the recommendations could be to have a better definition of what is a rural region. That could be one of the recommendations in the report. Thank you.
I think several members are probably already thinking that on that point. We're going to suspend for about 5 minutes to say goodbye to Mr. Anderson and get ready for a second part of a meeting. Mr. Janice, I'll get you in 2 seconds. Colleagues, we just need to please approve a couple of our budgets. As usual, we'll never spend all the money, but as our practice asks for a certain amount. First one is Canada Post, $1,000. We can get approval for that. Perfect, thank you. And then the second one is McKinsey is $2,000. All approved, wonderful. We're not going to, go ahead, Mr. Genuis. I was going to get to the Indigenous, but you go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I appreciate that we have some time set aside now to discuss the important issue of Indigenous procurement, and in particular some of the abuses of the Indigenous procurement system that have been much discussed in the media. You'll recall that we had concerns about this at OGO dating back to the spring, which is why we put forward a motion that was subsequently amended to both create a subcommittee to study the issue of Indigenous procurement and also to request a series of documents that would have helped us understand a variety of issues, but in particular the issue of subcontracting. Now, the concern is you have this program that should be designed to benefit Indigenous communities, to promote economic development, to benefit Indigenous peoples. However, there appears to be a lack of compliance with or verification of policies around subcontracting, such that what has been able to happen is that a very small qualified Indigenous company, maybe including 1 or 2 people, receives a contract and then en masse subcontracts the work to non-Indigenous companies. So Indigenous communities are not benefiting. The only people benefiting who are Indigenous are the 1 or 2 people at this company that simply receives contracts and then does the subcontracting. We've also heard concerns about joint ventures between Indigenous and non-Indigenous companies which qualify for the Indigenous set-aside, but substantively don't involve new employment or other economic opportunities for Indigenous peoples. More recently, just this summer, there have been revelations in various media outlets about further abuses, people claiming the qualification of being Indigenous and therefore the qualification of their companies as being Indigenous without being recognized by any Indigenous organization. So that's a further example of abuses. So we started raising this issue in the spring, and in the documents we looked at, there is a complete lack of tracking of these subcontracts. So what is clear from the documents we received is again, unfortunately, what I had expected, which was that you have a small number of very small companies that are benefiting from this set-aside whose primary business appears to be subcontracting, and in many cases subcontracting in a way that provides no benefit back to the people who are supposed to be benefiting. My preference would be that we have a dedicated subcommittee to delve into this issue involving what the Prime Minister has called the most important relationship. However, after the motion passed to create the subcommittee, my understanding is that that other parties didn't submit names for that subcommittee. I think there was also some confusion around the subcommittee motion, and from informal conversations with colleagues, my understanding is that there was a preference for these issues to be simply dealt with at OGO instead of at a subcommittee of OGO, and I'm comfortable with that as a compromise approach, provided that there is a willingness to do a meaningful study of this issue at this committee. I think there are many different aspects we need to delve into on this in a serious and substantive way. We need to delve into to what extent abuses have taken place and how have those abuses taken place, and then also how is this policy aligning with what should be the objectives of the policy. I think Canadians would expect that the objective of Indigenous procurement policy would be to stimulate opportunity and development for Indigenous peoples. However, when I had an opportunity to ask Minister Haidu about this, she rejected the premise as she said, no, the purpose of this policy is simply to verify indigeneity. It's not to measure or ensure positive economic outcomes for Indigenous communities. So I'm concerned by that. But even if the purpose of this program is merely to verify the Indigenous identity of those who are applying for these procurement set-asides, recent revelations that have come out this summer suggest that the program is not even doing that successfully. So I hope we'll be able to have a good, substantial, collaborative study on this issue that will give voice to Indigenous Canadians, in particular some of the leading Indigenous organizations that have been calling for further investigation and reforms here, and also that will give us an opportunity to ask substantial questions to ministers and to officials. So I'd like to put forward a motion that is different from the original motion. This is a motion not for a subcommittee, but rather for a study to take place here. And I think members will notice that this motion is not particularly prescriptive. It's relatively open-ended. It gives the committee an opportunity to respond to information that comes. And in that sense, I don't think it's particularly controversial, but we'll see. The motion is that the committee study Indigenous procurement, and that as part of its study, the committee invite the Minister of Indigenous Services of Canada, along with relevant officials, the Minister of Public Services and Procurement, along with relevant officials, the Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations with relevant officials, leaders of Indigenous nations and national Indigenous organizations, and other witnesses submitted to the chair by committee members. I've provided just this morning, but I believe it's available for distribution and it's translated. So the clerk will send it around to members in real time. And I hope this motion is fair and reasonable and allows us to move forward with this important study in a collaborative and substantive way, and will help us get to some positive, constructive recommendations we can make. Anybody who's read the news articles, who's looked at the documents we received, I think will acknowledge that there is a significant problem here that does require some work, and hopefully we'll be able to do that work together.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis. I've got a speaking order. I've got Mrs. Vignola, then Ms. Atwin. Go ahead, Mrs. Vignola.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Yes, it is important. In fact, I'll give my colleagues time to get their earpieces on, but it's important to review this issue. What I'm hearing on the ground is that there are people go to the U.S. and they have to show, when they go to the U.S., their Indigenous identity card. But there's no such thing here in Canada, no such controls. So we have to ensure that the policy we put in place really makes sure that we check these identities. So that's a good thing. That we study at a committee, that's fine with me as well. We'll have to see when we can do that, when we can provide our witness suggestions. The earlier the better, of course. So I think that should go to committee rather than subcommittee. I'm open to the issue also. Now, to know how many hours we should spend on this, well, we have a number of studies already on the table or subjects that we want to look at, and they're all important. I would suggest that we set a number of meetings, 2, 3, or 4, for example, to ensure that we can hear all the witnesses we want to hear from, and that we review this number if we need to hear from more people as witnesses. So going by, well, I think I need to amend the motion to be able to suggest the number of meetings.
On the amount of meetings? Or is that, or a minimum?
Excusez-moi, la traduction rentre pas du tout.
Oh, were you looking to have set a maximum or a minimum?
A minimum.
Okay. So I was talking to Alice about this report.
Je dirais,
I would say at least, so a minimum.
ça laisse la porte.
That means the door's open if we want more, you know, and after, if we have, for example, 4 meetings and we say that's enough, then that's enough.
Okay. So they keep everything the same, and then we'll just put, and that we have at least 8 hours of meetings.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we need to debate on the amendment, or can we accept the amendment? It's just adding.
Can we just have a brief suspension so we can take a look at the wording specifically, because we also may want to.
Can we keep it real brief? Perfect. We'll just suspend for a few minutes. debating the amendment from Mrs. Vignola about setting a minimum of 4 meetings, 8 hours for the motion. Was that one? I'm sorry, then Mr. Kusmirchuk, is your hand up? No, sorry.
Okay.
Go ahead, Ms. Atwin,
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
on the amendment.
And it's clear that there's a lot of confusion about what this program is designed to do and how it operates. And so we absolutely should study it. We're certainly in agreement with that. We'd like to do it in our OGO format and not the subcommittee. The 4 meetings, I think that makes sense as well. I really feel, though, that hearing from Indigenous leaders and heads of... Yeah.
Sorry, because we're on the amendment, on the motion itself, can we just... We're debating the amendment. Can we agree to, if you're in agreement with the 4, can we just agree to that? Then we can actually debate, then I'll turn the floor over to you to debate the actual motion.
Leading up to something.
Oh, okay.
Yes. As often happens. So again, with the Indigenous leaders piece and those that are heads of Indigenous organizations, I don't believe that they would have a lot to contribute on this, but outside of the program itself, but we want to hear from Indigenous business owners and entrepreneurs. I think they would be able to really shed light on how this works, how they're benefiting. It's not specifically about communities. It's about individuals, those businesses and entrepreneurs. And so I think that's where the confusion lies. Even the comment you mentioned about Minister Haidu's response, it's because it's for individuals. Certainly there are benefits, I would say, spin-offs for communities, for those living in, hiring folks from their community, but it's about those individual businesses specifically. So I think we'd like to amend the language to include those voices. So I'd like to propose a sub-amendment.
No, we're amending, we're debating just the 4 hours part.
Can I amend her amendment, though, as the last level?
It's a new.
Because-
Ms. Vignola's amendment has been disposed of.
we-
It's actually an amendment she wants to move.
No, I think it's
Because
more because it's substantive. You're actually amending the motion itself, not Mrs. Vignola's amendment. But we're debating, you can amend hers to do a sub-amendment for 6 hours, not 8, but you can't do a sub-amendment to change the original motion when we're only debating the 8 hours, 4 meetings from Mrs. Vignola. So we just have to agree to hers first. It sounds like it. Then you can do yours.
Can I just, one point of clarification? I just wanted to clarify, this is a maximum of 4
No,
meetings.
it's a minimum.
If we can get clarification from Madame Vignola, because I understood that it was a maximum of 4 meetings.
No, it's at least 4 meetings.
It's a minimum of 4 meetings.
Yeah.
This will be open-ended forever. Okay. So we're just debating we can prove that, then we can get to your amendment on the amended motion. So are we in agreement, everyone, for the minimum of 4 meetings, 8 hours?
Nope. I'd like
Okay.
to, yeah. I just think that we should have a maximum of 4 meetings. I really believe that as we get into this, your answers to your questions will be very apparent, and I don't believe we would need that many, to be perfectly honest.
Mr. Genuis and Mr. Kusmirchuk on the amendment of 4 meetings.
That could be a
Yeah.
supplement.
So, respectfully, Ms. Atwood has tried to characterize this as if I just have some misunderstanding of what's going on, and otherwise everything's fine. I would note that in reality, the Assembly of First Nations, the Algonquin Anishinaabe Nation Tribal Council, and the Assembly of First Nations Quebec and Labrador have accused Ottawa of negligent management of the program and have called for an audit to be done. And in fact, the president of the Auditor General, thank you, and the president of the Inuit Tapirit Kanatami called, and I'm quoting the article, called the workarounds a form of identity theft and the next stage of colonization. So according to prominent Indigenous leaders in Canada, there are serious problems with this program. This isn't just Garnet Genuis or the Conservative Party raising concerns. This is Indigenous leaders who have repeatedly, publicly called for further action and investigation on this, and we are using the ability we have as elected members of Parliament to magnify their voice and magnify their concerns. I I think four meetings is a reasonable place to start, and we'll see where we are after that. But we want to hear from ministers. We want to hear from elected leaders of Indigenous organizations. And we do want to hear as well from individual entrepreneurs, businesses who are individual users of the program. And obviously they have different kinds of testimony to bring us. The representative organizations of Indigenous peoples will be able to speak to broader community impacts and particular entrepreneurs will be better positioned to speak to the experience of the entrepreneur engaging the program. I think recognizing that we want to hear from, at least I think we want to hear from those elected Indigenous leaders, as well as entrepreneurs, as well as people on the Government of Canada side responsible for this program. We can't be too limited in the number of meetings we have. Recall that I was the one who initially proposed a subcommittee, which would allow us more time and flexibility to have multiple studies going on at once. Members didn't want to go that way. That's fine. But I do think we need to set aside we need to recognize these realities. And I hope members of the government aren't suggesting that we would not want to hear from these representative Indigenous organizations, because although they're not the direct users of the program, I think elected Indigenous leaders have an important perspective to offer about what the impacts of this program are and should be, and some of the broader issues around how Indigenous identity is defined and measured. I think we certainly would not want to exclude their voices from the conversation. So I think the amendment proposed by Ms. Vignola is reasonable, and we'll be supporting it.
The PSIB program is a vital program, and we absolutely want to hear from Indigenous leaders, but we also want to hear absolutely from Indigenous entrepreneurs. And so we actually want to expand the scope of witnesses. We think this is a good news story, this program, and we believe as well that it's important to always look for ways to improve programs, as we do in this committee looking at all programs. So we welcome these meetings. We welcome the expanded scope of witnesses, but we do firmly believe that having never-ending studies has an impact on the other studies that we are doing at this committee as well too, that are equally vital and important as well too to the work of this committee. And so I would recommend, or I would put forward a sub-amendment to Madame Vignola's amendment that would call for between 4 and 6 meetings. And so there would be a maximum of 6 meetings. It would call between 4 and 6 meetings. So, or we can actually phrase it as maximum of 12 hours, and then that way there's flexibility in that scheduling.
Mr. Sorry, Backrack, then Mr. Generous.
Just through you to Mr. Kuzmierczak. He just offered 2 different ideas. Is it the latter one that the sub-amendment would read? 12 hours?
Minimum 4, maximum of 6, or 12 hours. 12 hours, yes, that is correct.
Yeah, I think moving towards just defining the studies in terms of the numbers of hours of testimony gives the chair more flexibility in terms of organizing meetings. So if we have a half meeting, for instance, so I'm fine with 12 hours.
Yeah, sure. I guess my view would be that the public can see in the logic of Mr. Kuzmierczak's point that he is less comfortable with this issue being studied than he initially claimed to be, because he said, "Oh, we welcome this discussion. We want to broaden the scope of witnesses that are going to be called, and we want to also constrain the number of meetings." This committee can consider its own agenda. The other motions that come up in terms of setting the agenda, I don't think that asking for ministers, leaders of Indigenous organizations, entrepreneurs, and additional witnesses that members may suggest, and confining that with a set limit on time when the study has not yet begun is going to make a lot of sense. And we're going to be in a position where likely, as this is going, we're going to have people that we didn't think to call initially who are going to come forward with feedback, who have had experiences, and I think we're putting ourselves in a potentially awkward position if we say, well, 12 hours but not 13, even if a leader of a major national organization or a significant entrepreneur who's been affected by this is the one it wants to come in that 13th hour. So I don't support the sub-amendment. I think the amendment was sufficient, and that's how we'll be voting.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Committees are masters of their own destiny, and so if we get to the maximum number of hours and we feel like the topic hasn't been sufficiently canvassed, we can certainly entertain a motion to extend it. I think just providing the chair and the clerk with some parameters around expectations is a reasonable way to go. It's certainly what we do at other committees. And in the case of our beloved study on rural postal service, I would note that the number of meetings was understood as a maximum. It's not an open-ended study like some of our other studies, and I just think it puts the committee in the driver's seat. I agree with my colleague, Mr. Genuis, that there are outstanding questions about how this program has been managed, and I think Canadians are interested in obtaining answers to those questions. And whether those answers can be made available in 12 hours of testimony, I have absolutely no idea, Mr. Chair. I'm willing to explore it and see where we get in 12 hours. And if we get to that point and there are unanswered questions and there are outstanding concerns, then absolutely I'll support extending the study beyond.
So 12 hours if necessary, but not necessarily 12 hours. On division. So said minimum of 4, maximum of 6.
Minimum of 8, maximum of 12.
Yeah, well, meetings, and then minimum of 8 hours, minimum of 12 hours. We're clear on that, everyone? That's clear. Yeah. Perfect. So the motion is amended. We're back to the original amended motion. Yep. Keep in mind, I know the comment you're making about witnesses, it does say and other witnesses, so that leaves that open. Yep. Go ahead, Ms. Atwood, on the amended motion.
So on the amended motion, just for further clarity, and also because, again, Minister of Indigenous Services of Canada absolutely can contribute to the conversation. I'm not sure how much Minister of PSPC or Minister of Crown Indigenous Relations could offer. So I would be proposing that we strike after Indigenous Services along with relevant officials, and then other witnesses submitted to the chair by committee members. And then that the committee members submit witnesses for the study no later than Friday, September 20th, again, just to have a timeline, that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House, and that pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee requests that the government table a comprehensive response to the report. And I can send that around.
Through you to Ms. Atwood, I missed whether that amendment was striking or those words or introducing them into the motion. Perhaps we could get a written version, just given there were a lot of words there. And
so it just strikes the naming of the other two ministers specifically, but it does leave the other witnesses piece, and then it adds the parameters of the timeline for witnesses and then reporting back to the House. But I can send it right now.
The report to the House we include as part of our report stage anyway, so it's kind of superfluous, not needed.
I like it there.
That's fine. And remind me, I won't have to mention it when we actually do the report. On the amendment, Mr. Bachrach and then Ms. Vignola.
Point of order, Chair. Is that going to be distributed? And because
I think it's just coming out right now.
Okay, and is she also proposing to strike?
Why don't we just wait a few moments till it comes out so we're clear on it.
Mr. Clerk, do you have it in both languages, Ms. Atwin, or are you sending it to the clerk to then be translated and distributed?
It's on the way.
Okay. Why don't we just?
Okay, I think we want to try to get this done. So
yeah, we're running out of time. Are you?
Well, I want to clarify then. Is the amendment proposing to strike the invitation to leaders of Indigenous nations and national Indigenous organizations. Is the amendment proposing to strike that?
Yes.
Okay.
It leaves it open in the other witnesses portion. Just doesn't specifically name it.
Right. Okay. So we do not support this amendment for a number of reasons. Number one, this is a study of procurement. Having the minister responsible for procurement is quite reasonable and I think important. This is an issue of an Indigenous program, but the way that Indigenous identity is defined in this country and the way that people may be manipulatively qualifying for it who shouldn't is also an issue of Crown Indigenous relations. I think inviting all three ministers makes sense. Needless to say, ministers don't have to come if they don't think they have something relevant to contribute. But I think we should invite all three ministers. Their responsibilities do all touch on it. The other thing is, I thought we had agreed, but it seems we didn't, that we should clearly state in the motion that we should be inviting leaders of Indigenous nations and national Indigenous organizations. We want to hear their perspective alongside that of others. I do not agree as well with setting a hard cap on witnesses. I think like it's Tuesday. The proposed witness deadline is Friday. When it has come out that this study is taking place, there no doubt will be folks who have been affected by this policy who will want to come forward, who will contact us, who will contact the chair. Given that we've already set some parameters around the timeline of this study anyways, I think having an open-ended witness submission opportunity so that if a witness comes before us and says, you know what, you really should hear from so-and-so, that witness can be added to the mix rather than saying, oh, well, too bad you had 3 days from the motion being adopted to the witness deadline, and if you didn't get your names in, too bad. So I think the motion as amended by Ms. Vignola is fine, and the 3 days from now hard cap on witness submission, the removal of reference to some ministers and to Indigenous organizations doesn't make a lot of sense. In terms of the reference to reporting our conclusions to the House, clearly we'll report our conclusions to the House, but that doesn't have to be in the motion. That's just something we always do. So I don't think anything in this amendment really adds.
And just in light of that, perhaps it would be simpler if we could separate them into two amendments. So then the first piece we can deal with separately, but I would like to have the piece about reporting to the House as a separate amendment. So we'll send them separately together in both official languages now.
Well, we'd have to have approval, UC, to withdraw.
Okay, well, Mr. Chair, here's a clean way to do it then. I would propose to sub-amend her amendment by taking out all of the changes she proposed, except the change that we would report our findings to the House. So I can move that sub-amendment and people can vote how they want on it.
Why don't we wait? Have you got this? Well, you got all these people here. What are they doing? Okay, why don't we wait? Why don't we suspend for 5 minutes to give? Well, we're not going to get, Mr. Jennis, you're proposing a sub-amendment to an amendment or to an amendment that we don't even have the clear wording on something that they're trying to sub-amend their own amendment. So let's just wait a couple minutes. How far are we from getting it actually in writing to the clerk?
1 minute.
1 minute. Well, we just wait 1 minute and then we can continue. Parties have an agreement. Floor is yours, Ms. Atwen.
So I was going to ask for unanimous consent to pull my amendment, but Mr. Genuis already had a solution for that.
Well, yeah. So the sub amendment that I had proposed was to remove all of the changes except the one that would say the committee would report on its findings to the House. So I think we now have agreement to adopt the sub amendment, the amendment, and the motion.
Which sub-amendment?
So my
We've adopted.
my sub amendment. So essentially, taking the effect of the change would be take the motion as is and
let's
add
vote on your
report to the
sub-amendment.
House.
Okay. Go ahead with your sub-amendment,
The,
please.
the sub amendment is to unmake all of the proposed changes except the change that proposes to that the committee will report on its findings to the House.
And we have UC for that? No, I see.
Sorry, the staff don't get to say no, Chair.
Well, I'm waiting for the MPs.
We had an understanding at the table, so they can talk to their members if they want.
Given all the back and forth, I want clarity. At other committees, it is a practice to indicate in the motion that the committee will be reporting to the House and requesting the government to respond formally. So every committee operates differently. I don't see any harm in including that if we indeed want to report to the House on some kind of timeline and have the government respond accordingly.
With us, it's just part of when we finish the line by line of the report, just like when we get to Canada Post, it's one of the checklists that it's in this font and that we.
So maybe it's a perfunctory thing that some committees do as a practice and some don't. I've never, during my time on the committee, I don't think I've seen us table a report yet. So I'm not used to. Oh, that's true. We have. What was the report?
Ms. Atwen?
Just for further clarity, I believe we're agreeing on keeping the piece that says that the committee report its findings and recommendations to the House, and that, pursuant to Standing Order 109, the committee requested the government table a comprehensive response to that report.
Cool.
And then we're in agreement. No?
Mr. Genuis wanted to remove that.
Yeah, like this is fine. We will take the report, the motion as it was. We will add in that the committee will submit a report and request a government response. Removing
all other parts of
but removing all other parts of the proposed changes.
Yes. In the writing.
We're good.
Perfect.
Yes.
Yes.
Putting that in.
Yes. So we're clear with that, everyone? We accept the.
Now I know.
We accept the sub-amendment, Mr.
All of these things will be affirmed or changed at the point we do the report anyway.
Thank you, Mr. Genuis. Are we fine then with Mr. Genuis's sub-amendment? I'm seeing nods around. Are we fine with the amended amendment from Ms. Atwen? Nods all around. We are fine with the final motion. Nods all around. Yes, so be it. And then I have Mr. Genuis, then Ms. Vignola, and Ms. Kusi, unless it's something. Go ahead.
Chair, I have one more motion on the matter of Indigenous procurement that I think will advance our work on it, and that is that the committee report to the House its recommendation that the procurement ombud study Indigenous procurement. Simple motion. I think a study from the procurement ombud would strengthen our understanding of this subject and contribute effectively to the collective response to it.
Similar to what we've had done with
exactly. We've done.
Yeah. Did I see Ms. Smithchuk? Go ahead, and then.
Yeah, I'm just
sorry, Ms. Vignola, did you have your hand up as well on this?
I think she did. Yeah.
Oui.
Yes, but not on this topic. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite understand. So what is the motion that Mr. Genuis has brought forward here?
I believe the clerk can distribute it. The motion is that the committee report to the House its recommendation that the procurement ombud study Indigenous procurement.
I think we asked them to do one on a ride count.
Mr. Chair, can we just suspend literally for 1 minute?
We'll suspend for 1 minute. 1 minute. who had asked for suspension. We're back. So back to you, Mr. Kuzmierczak.
Okay, so, yeah, but I will yield the floor to my colleague, Mr. Bakker.
So I think there are two competing objectives here, and I want to propose a bit of a compromise. I take the, I know, strange, eh? Unusual. I take the argument that having the procurement ombuds commence a study on this should not jeopardize our calling of witnesses or our securing of any witness testimony. So I don't see a need to postpone that until after we've conducted our study. Likewise, I don't see a need to report it to the House that we're going to ask the procurement ombudsperson to start a study. My preference would be that the committee write directly to the ombudsman and request that work get underway. And so I don't know if it would be welcomed as an amendment, but I would make that as an amendment that we remove the part of the motion requiring a report to the House, and that we change the wording to have the committee write directly to the ombudsman and request that he initiate a study on Indigenous procurement.
The proposed amendment, just change out having the committee write instead of reporting to the House. And wish to speak on that? Mr. Backrack, I'm disappointed that you took Mrs. Vignola's role of compromise.
Olive branch.
Mr. Genos?
Yeah, I mean, it's not my preferred route, but we can see it as a compromise if others will see it as a compromise. But do we all agree to do that route? Okay, mission accomplished.
Yeah, you got to be kind of.
Sorry, it just seems like we're getting, you know what, yeah.
For the committee to write to the ombudsman to do a study on the set-asides in Indigenous procurement.
Okay, so it's just a letter that we're sending to them. Okay, that's fine.
Wonderful. Sounds like we have agreement. So we're back to the original amendment, which is amendment instead of report to the House that we asked that the committee write.
The original motion.
Yeah, we're back to.
As amended.
Yes, we're back to the original motion as amended with having we will write to the procurement ombuds.
Wait, can you just read the whole text of the motion so we're clear? Yeah.
Sure. Do you have the?
No, I don't want to.
Do you have the? Just bringing it up. The original is that the committee report to the House its recommendation that the procurement ombudsman study Indigenous procurement. We'll change it to that the committee write to, with a recommendation to the procurement ombudsman that he perform a study on Indigenous procurement, as we've done in the past. We're fine with that all around? Wonderful. So be it. I had Mrs. Vignola and then Mrs. Cusi. Mrs. Vignola.
Donc, si je comprends bien,
If I understand you well, we have adopted the two motions submitted by Mr. Genius, and I can put in a notice of another motion, which has to do with Canada Post, which is also part of our mandate. I will read it, and it will be distributed to you in a few seconds. Considering the decision to amend the French-English statute to that of bilingual for staff in the Montreal region, that in accordance with 101 of the regulations, the committee invites people to testify for at least 2 minutes, for 2 hours. The minister and representative of Canada Post, the interpreters do not have the document, so we can discuss that. The reason for which I'm submitting this notice of motion is that most people are francophones. They speak English, but they prefer to receive service in their language. And when the office moves from French-English positions to bilingual positions, and this is something we've seen in some cities. French is totally set aside. And for someone in the office, once anybody starts speaking English in the office, everyone starts speaking English, and no one is interested in speaking French. And it's a feeling of colonialism. I'm sorry I have to use that word, but this is something that really exists, this feeling towards Francophone, and this is extremely sad. And the desire to protect the right of Francophones to work and be served in their language requires that we respect the French unilingual status one way or another. When a customer arrives and speaks English, employees respond in English. But Francophones have the right to maintain their status. And I would like to see in Canadian provinces that are Anglophone provinces, I would like to see offices that move from Anglophone status to bilingual status and see how people will react. And even if another status or another language were added, so people will react with good reason. People have the right to work with their language and to make sure that there's no loopholes or problems. This is a great committee. I have the right to submit this motion, which is very important for our fellow citizens and for Francophone employees as well, who want to be able to continue working in their language, because there's room for compromise. Usually it's only done in favor of one segment of society. It's unfortunate. That should not be the case. And that is why I'm asking that we meet the representatives of Canada Post and the minister responsible for official languages to clarify this decision that does not correspond to the laws of Quebec regarding official languages and does not even respect the Official Languages Act. Thank you.
Yeah, Mrs. Vignola, are you putting this on motion, or do you intend to, or on notice, or do you intend to have it debated right now?
On peut en débattre.
We can discuss it now, hoping that we find consensus very quickly.
Yes, she is tabling it now. Yeah. Yeah. Mr. Backrock wants to know if there's postal banking in the French language.
Yeah, my only point is that, again, Canada Post is arm's length, and I understand here that the motion requests that the Minister of Official Languages comes, but I don't know how much control the minister has on Canada Post, and I would say that it's probably negligible. And so I'm just wondering, again, there is no minister. Again, Canada Post is a separate entity. It's arm's length, Crown Corporation. And so I think bringing Canada Post in makes sense, but bringing the Minister of Official Languages, who is not responsible for Canada Post, I'm just trying to understand that motion.
À mon humble avis, faire.
In my humble opinion, inviting the minister responsible for official languages who will help clarify the rights and obligations of corporations that are regulated by the federal government. It's true that Canada Post is independent. However, we have laws that we need to respect. And we need to see to what extent the Official Languages Act can be implemented and see how the situation is different in Quebec, because Quebec does have an official language that is French, and we would like to hear the minister speak and find out from him how he ensures implementation of the Act, particularly the Official Languages Act. I think this is relevant. He cannot explain Canada Post's decision, of course, but he can quickly establish the connection with the Official Languages Act, and that is something that is important. We need to respect the Francophone status of Quebec and see how the two can go together so that we can make recommendations that affect all aspects of the problem. The decisions by Post Canada, for that, the representatives of Post Canada will be able to give us explanations. And then for the official languages issues, we will may be able to have clarifications and then carry out a longitudinal study.
Distributed, and if it's not available for distribution, could it just be read out in its entirety again?
Yeah, it has been distributed.
It has? Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
1:10 p.m.
Yep.
Yeah, I just wanted to ask, again, I just wanted to underline that, again, Canada Post is its own entity. It is separate. It is an arm's length corporation. We know this. It is separate from the government. There is no minister that controls its operations. And so the Minister of Official Languages does not oversee the operations of Canada Post. I agree with bringing officials in from Canada Post to answer those questions. But again, the Minister of Official Languages is not connected to the operation of Canada Post, which is arm's length. And so I wanted to ask whether Madame Vignola, in order for us to be able to begin this, would be willing to simply focus on Canada Post officials at that inaugural meeting to answer questions. But again, I reiterate here that the Minister of Official Languages does not control Canada Post because, again, Canada Post is its own entity. It is independent. It is its operating is controlled on its own and outside the purview of ministers.
Ça, j'ai bien compris.
I have understood that Canada Post is an independent entity acting at arm's length from the government. That being said, the government adopts laws. If we are saying no, we cannot ask the minister how the Official Languages Act is connected to the Francophone status of Quebec and how it's implemented in federally regulated institutions, then what is the purpose of the Official Languages Act? If no one can tell a federally regulated corporation that they have to respect the Act, what is the purpose for the Francophones of Quebec and elsewhere in Canada? It is important that the minister appear before us and talk about this act, how it is applied in federally regulated corporations, how it can protect employees and the citizens of Quebec, considering their Francophone status. And in that analysis, we can establish a link between the two. We can make proposals ultimately when we do our analysis. But if we are saying, no, the minister cannot speak about the Official Languages Act and how it's implemented on federally regulated corporations, because those corporations are independent, it's as if we are saying the Act serves no purpose and protects no one. I would like to hear him so that we can have a comprehensive and clear analysis of the situation. I hope I'm clearer now, because the objective is to hear him talk about the Act, the Official Languages Act, and its implementation in federally regulated institutions. Thank you.
Backrack?
On a point of order, I thought I heard earlier my colleague, Ms. Vignola, say that she was putting this motion on notice? Okay.
And I asked to clarify, yes. And
okay, sorry, I missed that.
Yes, we were
Thank
debating
you.
it. Thanks. Mr. Generous?
Thank you, Chair. Thank Ms. Vignola for moving this motion. Just respectfully looking at the subject matter, it does seem to me to be a more natural fit for the Languages Committee. Thank you.
And again, Mr. Chair, again, I do appreciate that oftentimes in discussions we bring forward motions as we discuss certain issues and whatnot. But I would like to have a quick opportunity to discuss this. I haven't had a chance to discuss this with our team here very quickly. So if I could ask for a minute suspension, just a minute, and we can get back to this this issue. Just 1 minute. Thank you. Yep. Thank you.
That we will move ahead with Canada Post, the Deputy Minister from Official Languages. The calendar's almost full already, so we may have to move it, say, by October 20, whatever the last, our last OGO day in October. Are we fine with that, colleagues? Yeah. So I don't need to read the amended motion. We'll have we'll ask for the DM Official Languages representative from Canada Post. It's a 1-2-hour meeting, and we'll do it by the end of October. We're fine with that? Thank you. Mrs. Vignola, we're good? Yep. Colleagues, thank you very much, and thank whoever suggested that, that change in the compromise. Appreciate it very much. Mrs. Kusi, you had your hand up.
Yes, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I also have a motion, but before I get to that motion, I would quickly like to ask, please, the status of the visits of, or the appearances of Madame Nicholson and Madame Joly.
Yes, we've asked several times. Unfortunately, as much as I tease the departments, I know a lot of them cooperate very well with us. I can't say the same of Global Affairs. They've ghosted us entirely on the situation despite repeated attempts, as they've done in the past to us. We will update Thursday. If we don't have an update Thursday, perhaps the committee may wish to issue a summons so that we can actually get a response from Global Affairs. But right now, despite repeated attempts, we have nothing from them.
Okay.
In your motion, please.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Well, unfortunately, reported today, another Liberal scandal. And this time, Mr. Chair, it's out of the Department of Environment and Climate Change, whereby we have Minister Guilbeault, who has overseen a failed audit by federal auditors with poor oversight over millions, once again, millions of dollars in green subsidies, and not a small amount, Mr. Chair, $625 million since 2016. You know, we've seen a very bad track record here from this government in terms of the Green Slush Fund, the studies we've undertaken here, including ArriveCan, where the concurrence motion is in the House today. But here we have today another report of $625 million since 2016, having failed a federal audit. And the federal audit team indicates that there are significant issues. 45 programs over 11 departments and agencies. No evidence of definite outcomes. No set targets. No measuring and monitoring of impacts. And there is no clear guidance to support decisions by programs. The audit report also indicates errors and inconsistencies in the work, including incorrect information, erroneous information, missing information, incorrect terms, and project files missing in entirety, something we also have seen with procurement evaluations by this government in the past. In fact, Mr. Chair, the audit team deems that this was so sloppy, and that's quite a word, sloppy. You know, you can say this is unfortunate, inconsistent, incomplete, but sloppy, that it poses potential legal and reputational damage to the department. So very concerning, Mr. Chair. So as a result, Mr. Chair, I am moving this motion now, which has been provided to the clerk in both official languages, which I would ask for distribution to the committee, that given the Environment Department has failed its audit of administration of grants and contributions for poor oversight of millions of taxpayer dollars spent on green subsidies, and the potential legal and reputational damage this presents, the committee dedicate at least 3 meetings to this matter and call on the following witnesses to testify. Deputy Minister Jean-François Tremblay, Assistant Deputy Minister John Moffat, Assistant Deputy Minister of Corporate Services and Finance and Chief Financial Officer Linda Drainville, Director General, Chief Audit Executive and Head of Evaluation Christopher McDonald, authors of the Administration of Grants and Contributions at Environment and Climate Change Canada, and finally, Madame Annie Boudreau, who is, of course, Comptroller General of Canada. I know that prudent distribution of funds is something that everyone on this committee is committed to, and I'm also aware that this government has prided itself on a number of green initiatives, which we see every day to be ever failing, and if not only is there concern regarding the procurement, but that they are able to deliver in their said priority of work on climate change and emissions reduction. And this is just another proof point, in addition to the carbon tax, I'll add, Mr. Chair, that this is not working for them. And here we have another failure here today with this reported failure of an audit coming out of the Department of Environment and Climate Change. And Minister Guilbeault, the felon himself in the green he'd like to be green, I'm sure, orange jumpsuit, is at the helm of this. And so as a result of this, on behalf of Canadians, I'm asking for the committee, please, to consider this motion I have put forward today. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Mrs. Cusi. The motion has gone out. I started speaking this. I have Mr. Kuzmierczak. Go ahead, sir.
Oh, thank you, Chair. And I just wanted to ask my colleague whether is this not being studied at public accounts already? Just curious if this is already being looked at by public accounts, which I think that it is. And we're talking about the we're talking about the SDTC. No, pardon me. Okay. Sorry, can you just clarify that? Because I'm just hearing the motion for the first time. So can you clarify what is the motion referencing? Which report?
Yeah, the motion is referencing the failure of the Environmental Department as indicated by the audit of the administration of grants and contributions. This is news from Environment Canada. Yes, thank you. Audit of the administration of grants and contributions. I indicated the other example as an example.
So as I understand that, again, this is a TBS issue, and so as I understand it, from my original question, this belongs in public accounts, and so I would say that that's my question on this motion is that again, this belongs in public accounts. That's the committee that studies these issues.
And I would disagree with that. I believe that we have the oversight here as we have brought forward many witnesses as a result of failed audits. We have the Auditor General, who, of course, who is responsible to this committee on her audit. So this is our response to another audit. The example that you thought I was referring to initially was being studied at public accounts. As I indicated, this is another audit which was announced in the media today, reported on in the media today, and we at Government Operations have called on several officials before, both elected and unelected, in an effort to hear from them about these failed audits. This is something that we make a normal practice of here in Government Operations is the review of the money, which has been, again, in this case, poorly spent on behalf of taxpayers. And so for me, this is almost business as usual, another task that we would set out to do in hearing from these officials from the Department of the Environment who have frankly failed this audit. I think that this is very business as usual for us, Mr. Chair, that we would, when we are made aware of such misspending, that we would want to take responsibility for exactly recognize it and call in the officials to figure out why. I feel as though we've passed several motions similar to this here in Government Operations, and I see this as unfortunately for your government, sort of just the next item of business on which it has failed, and therefore we need to get to the bottom of why. It's true, many of the answers seem to always point to the same systematic problems, but nonetheless, we cannot turn our backs or close our eyes to $625 million worth of poor spending, sloppy spending.
Yeah, we're here.
Thanks. And over to you, Mr. Kuzmierczak. I will note that the grants and contributions are approved through the estimates process that are approved through this committee. Go ahead, Mr. Kuzmierczak.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And again, I want to underline that this is an important issue. We absolutely want to get to the bottom of this, and it requires an investigation. There is absolutely no doubt. But what I am putting forward is that this is the wrong committee, that this belongs in the Public Accounts Committee. This is who has purview of this issue. And in addition, I would say that the officials that are listed are the wrong officials, that we should be looking at officials who are responsible for this, which is TBS. And so, again, agreed with my colleague that this issue requires investigation and discussion without a doubt, but that the proper committee is Public Accounts, and we want to make sure that we have the right officials that are being summoned that are in a position to answer those questions because they are responsible for those programs. And that is, those officials are TBS officials.
Mrs. Cusi?
That's right. They are TBS officials, as Mr. Kuzmierczak referred to, and TBS answers to Government Operations Committee. That's why we have Minister Anand here at a minimum of twice a year. So you're right. It is a TBS issue, and therefore it should respond. Yeah, exactly. What the heck? Therefore, that's why this should go to this committee. As the chair pointed out, grants and contributions are approved through the estimates process. We review the estimates process twice during the year with the estimates and then the supplementary estimates. Therefore, this motion should go through this committee, be passed at this committee, and be studied at this committee.
Again, I really do appreciate. I do appreciate the fact that my colleague wants us to investigate, that MPs to investigate, look into this issue. No one opposes that. But again, what I'm trying to highlight is that this belongs in public accounts. We all know that. This is outside of the purview of OGO. This belongs in public accounts. That is the proper venue for this investigation. Furthermore, the list of officials listed in the motion, none of them are TBS officials. And what I'm trying to emphasize here is that if you want to get to the bottom of this, and if you want to get the right answers, you want to have the right people brought before committee so that we can get to the bottom of this issue. And so my recommendation would be that this belongs in public accounts, and that let's make sure that the motion has the right officials that can provide the right answers to these very important questions. For that reason, what I would recommend is that we circle back. I'm happy to have a conversation with Ms. Kusi and other colleagues around this table, including the chair, to bring this motion back on Thursday to make sure that it has the right officials, that it is surgical, and that we get the answers that we're requiring. So I'm just asking Ms. Kusi if we can please revisit this on Thursday after having the opportunity to discuss this offline as a committee. We want to get this right, the right people, and the right venue.
Mm-hmm. She will come with our officials.
Mm-hmm. Well, you are opposing it. You said no one opposed this. You are opposing this. Your main argument, which you yourself recognize, which was incorrect, was that this is not a TBS issue. This is a TBS issue. Annie Boudreau is a TBS official. She is listed on this motion. Therefore, both the subject matter and the witness list is relevant to this committee. This is relevant to this committee. It's very clear to me that this is a TBS motion, and this is the committee which has oversight of TBS, and therefore we should pass this motion at this committee and study this $625 million issue at this committee.
Again, the only official of relevance here is the controller, as comptroller, as was mentioned. The other officials that are listed would not be able to provide the answers that we're looking for. And so, again, I want to emphasize: let's get the right venue, which is public accounts, and let's get the right people, which is the officials from TBS. The motion does not have the people that we want to answer those questions, which are folks from the Treasury Board Secretariat, from TBS. Those are the right people that have carriage of these files of this issue. So again, I would just ask my colleague. We're simply asking for an opportunity for us to meet as a committee offline to make sure we've got the right people. Let's come to an agreement. And when we move, when the motion, when Parliament looks at this issue, let's make sure it's the right venue, the right people that can answer the questions and help us get to the bottom of this important issue.
Well, yes, didn't complete the audit, but they are being brought in, as is listed in the motion. These are the right people. Madame Boudreau, I'm sure, would appear with her officials as well. I'm not sure why you are so adamant about not studying this at this committee, when clearly, as you recognize, this is a TBS issue. TBS is responsible to this committee, and we have on this witness list the comptroller, the DM, who has oversight for TBS, and she did not do the audit. So it just makes sense that we would have those who completed the audit attend as well to get some answers, as some clarity exactly as well. It's just, as I said, we have done a number of invitations to witnesses where there have been poor audits, and there have been many who have sat in those seats who have responded to this committee on audits. And it's just unfortunately another example, another news story that we have today of this most recent one. But we have to evaluate that as well. It's true that there are other committees that study things in tandem. Public Accounts is also studied ArriveCan. In my understanding, the motion that we just passed relative to Canada Post was evaluated by Official Languages Committee as well. So yes, it's possible that these motions can be in tandem at more than one committee. But this is the committee. This is the Committee of Audit and Evaluation of the spending of federal funds. We are fundamentally those who are held responsible for the oversight of these funds in this committee, and therefore we should start here. And if you don't believe that we should start here, then I think in fact you do oppose the evaluation of the $625 million. And I don't blame you, given the dismal record of this government and the dismal record of this government's spending, of this government's waste, of this government's unethical mismanagement of funds, of this government's systematic flaws with procurement. There's lots of things which have been revealed through our audits of audits, through our testimony of those who have conducted the audits. But this is another one that we need to undertake at this time. And it starts here. It doesn't always end here, but as we see with the ArriveCan, which has gone back to the House today. But this is fundamentally the committee where these things are uncovered. And I recognize this is a heavy burden for the government to carry, the government members to carry in this committee. My goodness, I hope when we're in government, I really don't want to be on this committee at that time. But all to say, nonetheless, sorry. There we go. Nonetheless, that's right. There'll be no scandals, right? You are, Mr. Genuis. But this is where we find ourselves, and we are facing another $625 million a scandal here. And so let's stop trying to pass it off. Let's not delay the pain. Let's rip off the Band-Aid. Let's not delay it till Thursday. Let's not pass it off to another committee. No one can have your baby for you, right, Kelly Block? You got to go in there and deliver that thing. And I see Julia smiling. And this is the same situation. You know, we have to go through this process, start this process here, and go through this process here. I don't like reading these news stories any more than you do, Mr. Kuzmarchuk. Especially given your ambitious agenda and your leader's ambitious agenda. But clearly it's not working. It's not happening. And so I just think, for goodness sakes, just you've made your points there. I perceive them to not hold water, to be inaccurate. This is where it starts. Let's get this done. Let's get this study of this audit started to find out where things went so terribly wrong. Because my goodness, if you have any path forward, it's through green initiatives. And so, you'd be doing yourself a favor in starting it here. So with that, Mr. Chair, I'll conclude this.
So we have Mrs. Vignola.
Thank you.
Then Mr. Kuzmarchuk.
Rapidement.
Very quickly. I'll try to be as concise as possible. The topic is important. It's not the first time that we are discussing surprising expenses. Let's remember that everything that has to do with past expenditure has to do with public accounts. For future expenditure, it's us. Contracts is us. And award processes, it's us. So my friendly amendment is that we specify, and I'll be rereading the beginning of the motion, given the Environment Department has failed its audit of the administration of grants and contributions for poor oversight of millions of taxpayer dollars spent on green subsidies, and the legal and reputational damage this represents, the committee dedicate at least 3 meetings I will remove to this matter. And I add process for award of grants. And we could also say and invite all witnesses that the committee would consider important to appear. That way, we will invite the witnesses we want to appear. We are certain that those are the right people that we are inviting. So these are the amendments I'm proposing.
Just to be clear, it's we'll take out the named witnesses. So it'll be just witnesses as decided by the committee. And what was the other item?
3 meetings.
Oh, no, there was 3 meetings. And there was one other thing.
The committee dedicate at least 3 meetings, and instead of saying to this matter, I would replace that with the committee dedicate at least 3 meetings to the subvention award procedure, which falls within our purview.
Instead of to this matter, 3 meetings.
Sur le
3 meetings on the grants award procedure.
So dedicate at least 3 meetings to the grants and contributions process and invite witnesses as the committee wishes. Is that clear?
consensus.
Yeah, if we can just get that in writing, that would be terrific. Thank you. And maybe can we just take a minute suspension?
Sure.
Again, we're getting motion
Okay.
thrown after motion without any notice of motion, so, which.
Yes, yes.
Yes, she
Yes,
does?
yes.
Okay.
Yep. Well, just quickly that a lot of the witnesses noted actually are listed in the audit as the recommendations are to be sent to them for action. And it does refer back a bunch to kind of the whole estimates cycle. But we'll suspend for about a minute. We'll get the proper wording. And I will confirm, Ms. Vignola, the idea is to eliminate the noted witnesses in this motion. Yeah. received the updated amended motion. Anyone else wish to speak up? Mr. Kuzmierczuk?
I know that my colleague, Madame Vignola, had put forward an amendment that I believe wasn't accepted, and I'd like us to have an opportunity to actually vote on that and to her amendment, because I think it focuses on the grants and contributions writ large, and it also focuses on process, which again, as I maintain, the audit, the concerning audit, the proper venue for that is public accounts. We want to make sure that we have the right officials that are being summoned, but I am interested in the grants and contributions process writ large, and so I would actually prefer us to vote on Madame Vignola's. I think amendment is what she's brought forward. Is that correct? Is that an amendment?
That's where we're at right now, is Mrs. Vignola's amendment.
And if I could just add a sub-amendment to that, if that's okay. What I would ask, or what I would put forward, or what I am putting forward, is a sub-amendment that simply rewords the first sentence to say, given the audit of the administration of grants and contributions.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you. That's not concerning the amendment. You can't amend. You can only amend her amendment.
Her amendment, yes.
Yeah, but you're amending the first line of the motion.
No, I think that's her. That was Madame Vignola's amendment, is it not?
Her amendment's just taking out wording, basically.
Sorry, and I do apologize, but as I understand. Oh, okay. Okay, so I think in that case, the proper procedure, correct me if I'm wrong, just looking for a little bit of guidance, Mr. Chair and Mr. Clerk, is that we vote on the Madame Vignola's amendment.
Right, and then you can
and then
get
basically
yes.
to then amend the original motion. Okay.
Can we do that?
And so just to clarify, what we're asking here, what the sub-amendment does, is it simply is asking for 3 meetings to focus on the contributions process. Is that correct? As a general.
Yeah, Miss, can we get to the vote? I'm going to be blunt here. You know, we've broken a lot. Suspended a lot for meetings. It's now appearing, only appearance. I'm not accusing you, but it's looking like you asked for the suspension and now delay in order to burn out the clock. And if that's the case, we will not allow any such suspensions in the future. I hope we're not at that. Can we get to the vote then on the sub-amendment? Or the amendment?
Mr. Chair, just to be fair again.
Okay, it's clear, Mr. Kuzmierczuk.
No, because there was a slight accusation that was made here about my integrity, and I take vigorous exception to that. We had a slew of motions that were tabled today. I want to make sure that I have all the information, and I want to make sure that our team has all the information necessary to make the best decision in the interest of Canadians. And that is a fact, Mr. Chair, and I do take exception to what you were intimating with your comments, and I ask you to retract that.
I will not, because I did not make such a thing. I said the appearance would be, but can we get to the vote on the amendment? Yes? On division?
Sure.
Recorded vote, please.
Recorded vote?
Ms. Atwin?
In favor?
Mr. Baines?
Oui.
Mr. Xiang?
Yes.
Mr. Kuzmierczuk?
Yes.
Mr. May?
Oui.
Ms. Block?
Yes.
Mr. Jenis?
Yes.
Ms. Kuzi?
In favor.
Madame Vignola?
Oui.
Mr. Backrack? Okay, so yeas pour 11, and nays contre 0, 0.
Okay, wonderful. So the Amendment passes. Unfortunately, we are out of resources out of this moment, so I am adjourning.